So 280F is really a depreciation limiting section. So if you want to take the full benefits of having a boat or a yacht or an RV or a vehicle, then you need to be able to take the most advantage of the depreciation. So there are specific rules in order to meet this, in order to go and deduct the full amount. But that's really what it does, is that it says, okay, if you meet this criteria, you have to limit your depreciation.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us on the Tax Rep Network podcast. I'm Eric Green. I'm clearly traveling today, not my usual backdrop. I am joined by one of our trainers, Vicki Boone. It's very exciting. She just left the IRS. Literally, today is your first day. Today, we're October 1st. It's your first day of freedom on the light side of the table, we like to think. But Vicki was the subject matter expert in 280F, 1031, really interesting stuff. So, like-kind exchanges, boats, yachts, RVs, cars, what can you write off? So, Vicki, thanks for doing this. I'm very excited to have you.
Thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed my 22 years at the IRS, almost to the day. It's kind of funny, but I'm excited now to branch out and do education and consulting and really take the stuff that I learned from the IRS and share it with the public here.
Oh, yeah, no, listen, we just put up that link so we're doing a webinar on October 16th. The link is in the description below. It went live this morning. We already have several hundred people on. I mean, it's going to be a very exciting program because there's a lot of both tax pros, but certainly taxpayers who don't understand this. And, it's funny. I never really thought, planes and boats, that was like a big thing. It is.
It's huge.
Huge. And,
Yeah.
so I've had attorneys reach out to me about this program already. So there's a lot of excitement about it. And so if you don't mind, for those folks who don't know what we're talking about, what is 280? I mean, it's a code section, 280F, but what does 280F do?
So 280F is really a depreciation limiting section. So if you want to take the full benefits of having a boat or a yacht or an RV or a vehicle, then you need to be able to take the most advantage of the depreciation. So there are specific rules in order to meet this, in order to go and deduct the full amount. But that's really what it does, is that it says, okay, if you meet this criteria, you have to limit your depreciation. And then there are other code sections that pick up after that might disallow it even further. But that is what the 280F is. And it's a big thing that people trip over and really have struggles with. I would have, at the IRS, I would help and consult on a lot of the other cases, and at least a couple a week, sometimes a couple a day, I would consult on different aircraft. And towards the end of when I left, they were asking more questions about yachts and RVs and even vehicles. A lot of times, the vehicles have been overlooked, but a lot of this initiative with the high income initiative and global high wealth, all of those initiatives have people looking at some of these smaller items, because when they bundle together, they end up being a large deduction.
So not only are we doing this on Tax Rep Network on October 16th, we're doing it again a few weeks later on My Law, CLE. As it turns out, My Law is out of Miami. Boats and planes are a big deal. I didn't realize it, but the founder, John Hawley of My Law, was like, when he saw that we were having you, he was like, you got to have, I need to have Vicki on our platform. He said, you have no idea how much confusion there is around here, because he is part of the boating community down there. I didn't, again, realize there were clubs and there's all kinds of online groups. He said, no one knows what the hell's going on. And so he said, it's going to be a very popular program. And so it really is, because honestly, I've not dealt with it myself. I have a client now that it looks like we're going to have an issue about the plane. So we may bring you in to consult. And it's really a question of, like, I guess you can write off the business use, obviously not the personal use. How do you do that? Is it like logged hours that you're flying? How do you even start doing that?
Well, aircraft is a little bit different because they have a few extra rules that aren't that don't apply to other things like boats and vehicles. But it really comes down to documentation. You document each person and what their use is, what their relationship is, and what they're doing, what's their business purpose. And it really comes down to that. And then once you have that information, you can plug in all the numbers and make all the little logistics work. But it really comes down to documentation. Do you have that? Is it contemporaneous? Can it be backed up by something? So, for example, if you say, hey, we went to this board meeting. Okay, so do you have the minutes for the board meeting, for example? Things like that that you can do to really make that log come to life. So it's the log itself is just a starting point. You need to have something beyond that.
Well, it's similar for folks listening. When I've had audits for people that do a lot of driving, so they'll have their manual, but having been an auditor, not for the IRS, but I was an internal auditor. Well, you're saying you were here. What are the other points around that? So, for instance, so I'll ask them, well, what were you doing in that area? Well, we were working on this building. Do you have the invoices for that building, that address, right? Did you go to the Lowe's? In other words, can I start tying in so that an auditor can see you're saying you did all this driving back and forth, like we're in Connecticut, to White Plains, New York. But I see you went to the Lowe's there multiple times over that month. We see invoices for a building in White Plains. In other words, the evidence really I tell them it's like the scales of justice. We're putting as much as we can on to tip the scale in our favor. Clearly, you were there for business. You weren't just driving to
Right.
see your girlfriend in White Plains, right?
Right.
So I guess it's very similar, right? If you're using the plane for business, what was the business and what, I guess, third-party information around that trip would support that?
Right. And, just a lot of it with the aircraft comes down to people think, oh, look, I have the FAA logs, right? So I'm completely fine. No, 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 that's not. That's only the starting point because the FAA logs don't give any business purpose whatsoever.
Right.
So you can use that as a starting point, and that's exactly what the IRS does. They have a contract and they can get the FAA logs. So that's great, but you just know how many passengers. You don't know the passengers' names, you don't know their business purpose. They could be a chef or a personal assistant or anything in between.
Wait. You mean people try to write off personal stuff for business?
All the time. I've seen it
I'm
all.
stunned.
I
Yeah,
even write off trips to go to visit their alma mater and do football games and different things like that. So it just if you wanna do that, that's fine, but you can't necessarily deduct that. It just depends on all the other stuff what's the primary purpose of the actual trip and what are you doing?
I had an audit like 10 years ago, and we're going through stuff, and there's in all of their office expense, which is over $1 million, there's one item for 200 and it was like 245,000. It was like even. And I was like, what is that? And he rolled up his sleeve and he showed me what the presidential Rolex with the diamonds. And I said, among many things that he was just running through his company, his daughter's wedding ran through one year. And I just remember thinking, I know I'm paid to represent you, but I'm kind of rooting for the government here. So anyway, no, people do all kinds of stuff. So during the program, what we're going to do is break down for folks the way that this should be done, how they can document this properly so that they can, if Uncle Sam does come calling, which is going to be really debatable these days, but if they do come calling, how to handle this, right? That you can go to sleep knowing I've got everything in place so that I can support the number. I don't have to worry about the return. But mostly, I'm really interested to dispel a lot of the myth around this stuff because you talk to accountants, they're like, oh, yeah, just allocate the hours, it'll be fine. I'm like, no, I'm not really not sure that's the way it works. But are there certain specific issues you've seen come up again and again and again? Let's just take boats, for example. Is there one specific thing that you could point to that people seem to just get wrong?
A lot of it has to do with the logs. I mean, they don't keep the logs. the logs don't prove the business use. They are really lacking in substantiation, right? You go to the log and you say, okay, I went to this, or we held a party here, or this, or we did that. Okay, show me the invites, show me emails, show me something that's contemporaneous, show me a calendar, show me something else that backs that up. And that's the biggest thing with any of these, whether it be planes or yachts or anything, is the logs. They're not maintained as well as they could be, and they don't document the business use. If you use it for business, document it, and for aircraft, one thing that you could do is, okay, fine, you use it for personal use. That's fine. Do a CIFO calculation, pick up a little bit of income, and now you get a deduction still. So there are ways that you can do things. Like I said, aircraft is special and, there are specific rules for that, but there are ways that you can really still get that full deduction. And you just have, it really comes down to documentation. Do you have it documented in addition to, it's not just each trip, it's each person on each trip. So what's their relationship? Did they go on it? Did you happen to bring some family members? Do the family members, are they employees? Are they not employees? Did you bring your girlfriend? Did you bring, fill in the blank? Who are these people? What do they do? What's their relationship? And that's the biggest area right there. If I could sum it all up in one thing, it would be documentation.
Yep. Yep. No, I get that. I had all kinds of questions I just lost. Oh, with cars. Actually, you know what? I have to tell you the truth. I have cars, I have RVs. Question. With automobiles, I would think autos should be pretty cut and dry, aside from the mileage log that people don't like to keep. There are all kinds of apps now that do this. I think QuickBooks
There's
app.
a lot of different apps that do it, and they do that. But I mean, even with these logs,
Yep.
you have a log, you can back that up with, oh, look, I had an oil change, right?
Right.
Okay, now I have the mileage on my oil change receipt. So now that backs up and it proves my log is correct. So if you have that documentation of sometime around the beginning of the year or the end of the year, you can show, hey, look, here's this. A lot of those car repair shops, they actually, when they do all the different services on your car, they log it in and it goes to Carfax. You can get a Carfax report on it and it'll show, here's the mileage on this date. So there are different ways that you can go back and try to recreate some of those mileages logs too.
Oh yeah, no, what I've done is I don't actually keep a mileage log day to day, but I have a calendar so I can see where I was. And I have Google Maps or MapQuest or one of those. But it's the third step beyond that. All right, so I drove here. What was the business purpose? And is there anything around that would also support that there was a business purpose? Does the IRS get the Carfax reports? Do they have access to that?
I don't think so. I mean, it's something that they might be able to pull it down, but it's just as easy for the person to pull it down. I mean, the IRS isn't going to look for your substantiation. They're going to tell you, hey, look, if you want the deduction, you got to substantiate it.
True.
So they're not going to go looking for it. They will get things like the FAA logs. That's something that they will get because then they can make sure that all of the flights are accounted for, right? They can say, okay, look, these are all the flights. The flights matched up with the FAA. We're good to go. We're not worrying about additional use that's not documented somewhere.
Yeah. No, my thought was be to get the Carfax report when they see how much people have claimed to try to show them we can look at the miles. But no, it's funny. I have an audit. We're now going to appeals, but I had an audit, and the accountant handling it took the position it's the government's problem to prove, and so didn't cooperate with the auditor, provided almost nothing, and so then called us and said, "Hey, tax court case. We're going to need you to file in tax court." And I mean, basically, the moment you see the report and everything's been disallowed, I'm like, okay, so there was clearly a breakdown here. Either they're fraudsters, right, that just made everything up, or something happened. So I asked, and he said, "Well, they kept asking for stuff, and I told them it's your problem. You're the government. You're doing the audit. You do it." And I had to explain to him, actually, that's not true. The burden is on the taxpayer to prove that they're entitled to the deduction. And he said, "Well, if you get them filed in tax court," I said, "You don't understand something. We're going to get it filed in tax court. It'll get sent to appeals. When it gets to appeals, the burden's on you. We're going to have to produce all this anyway. Like, what the are you thinking?" I whatever. And but no, the burden is on the taxpayer.
For
But
deductions, for income, that's the burden is on the IRS to
yeah,
prove the.
yeah. But for instance, the IRS takes the bank statements, adds up all the deposits. I think it's the state of Mason is the case. That's income. The burden now shifts to the taxpayer to prove if
Yep.
it's not taxable. But no, what I was thinking about was I have had the instance where, let's say, the taxpayer didn't have copies of the FAA logs. I've asked the examiner, "Can you get them?" And I've had them actually agree to summon stuff. Like we had a bank that merged, and my client didn't have the bank statements. And you went online, and they couldn't get them online anymore. And they went into the bank, and the bank claimed that it was on microfiche, and they don't know where it was. Wells Fargo had bought one of these other banks. Remember when all those mergers were going on in the early 2000s? It was that. And we asked the auditor. The auditor said, "I'll summons them." And did summons them. They got the records. They gave us copies of it. And we got through the audit.
I mean, they can go through and summons those type of records.
Right.
Now, the FAA records, they don't need a summons. They just need to have requested them from the taxpayer. And then once they do, they have an agreement and they just pull them down. Because I think pretty much anyone can go and access a lot of the FAA information. It's public information at that point. So,
right. Well, I'm very excited for our program on the 16th. Out of curiosity, if folks want to get a hold of you, they have an audit going on, or they have a client, they want to just consult with you, how's the best way to get a hold of you?
I've just joined my husband's consulting business. So the easiest way to get in touch with me is victoria@boone.tax, or you can go to just boone.tax and you can look up our company and in the different representation that we do on there.
Yep. So for the folks listening to this on the podcast channels, Boone, BOON.tax. So listen, thank you. And thanks for doing this. And I'm looking forward to the 16th for people listening. The link is in the description. You can go register for this. You're going to learn everything you need to know about 280F, or at the very least, you're going to have a really good understanding how this works. And if you need to or want to reach out to Vicki, please do so. Your 22 years of expertise from the IRS is hugely helpful. I got that plane client I may be talking to you about. John's got the boat and stuff. So Vicki's going to be in high demand. And otherwise, listen, thanks everyone for listening to this week. Vicki, thank you. And looking forward to the webinar on the 16th.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well.
All right. Thank you.